Hi, this is Paul. And one of the things that I mention when I go to these conferences is that when people come up to me at a live event and they want to do a randos, I say yes because I want to encourage people to come to live conferences and do that. And so Father Daniel met me at the Midwestuary. And he said, "Oh, I'd really like to talk to you." I said, "Well, let's do that." So today we're getting a chance to do that. So, well, let's begin with you, and then we'll see where the conversation goes. So, why don't you start by telling me a little bit about the home you grew up in?
The home I grew up in. So my parents, well, my father grew up with his father being a minister
Oh,
oh yeah. So my grandfather's a minister. My father, I believe he is still practicing as a minister. We can get on to that later. But so I grew up in what would be called the Churches of Christ. So Stone Campbell movement slash Restoration movement.
yeah,
uh, which I don't know where you would have encountered that because it's mostly a southern and maybe lower Midwest experience than it is Jersey,
yeah.
Michigan, California. Although Pepperdine is associated with Churches of Christ.
Well, I did a seminary summer assignment back when I was at Calvin Seminary. We do these summer assignments. I was in Columbia, Missouri for a
Uh,
summer, and there was a lot of that there. And um, Mark Parker, who's one of the guys in the corner, has his own station. He lives in Redlands down in Southern California. He has been he's worshiped in a number of churches from that, and it's a significant it's a really, and so he's actually been digging in a lot of the history of it, which kind of forced me to look at some of the history. It's a really significant movement in American church history.
yes, you don't realize that when you're growing up in it because you're just awash in it and it's the
Yeah.
only thing that you know, right?
Yep.
So I grew up to be because when you talk about this, the Restoration movement, it's like you have the disciple. I'm going to say left and right, even though this doesn't really map on per se in any kind of political way, although sometimes it does kind of, with the disciples of Christ kind of being the mainline rendition of it. Churches of Christ slash Christian church kind of in the middle. We're more evangelical. And then on the right is Churches of Christ. And even in the Churches of Christ, I grew up even kind of further afield because it kind of just keeps fracturing with its
Mm.
basic impulse. So, like Lipscomb University, Harding University, Freed Hardman, these are like Tennessee, Arkansas, Abilene Christian in Texas. These would have been liberal for what I grew up in
Okay.
because I was a part of a fragment of the fragment that was called like non-institutional Churches of Christ.
Okay.
So, actually, non-institutional, how do I describe that? All of this matters because this has set me on the trajectory of where I'm at now, right?
Sure.
So, um, non-institutional means there was a huge debate kind of post World War II that was about what exactly is the relationship between a congregation and broader institutions, right? So if you're congregationalist polity, how can do you take money out of the treasury, the money that's put together, and then send it off to a college or an orphanage or these things? And so there's a big debate that occurred saying we can't find precedent in scripture for this thing, therefore we can't do it,
Ah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So very much particular type of, I don't know, but it's because it's not just Protestant, it's even a much more, I forget the lingo, right? Because even kind of a Puritan idea, right? There's like
Yeah. Yeah. That was,
if
the
there's
Christian Reformed
silence,
Church would say similar things. Yeah.
right.
Well,
So,
restorationist, it's this movement that we're going to we're going to limit everything just to scripture. And that can either have, let's say, more of a restrictive posture where we will only do things that are in scripture, or more of a permissive posture where we would say we will only mandate or commit to what is in scripture and other things are open. And so that same instinct can sort of turn both ways.
which hence disciples of Christ, churches of Christ,
Yep.
where you have to the right of us in that spectrum were those who wouldn't have classrooms wouldn't have were one cuppers is what they were called. I mean, we have all
Yep,
sorts in
yep, yep,
Missouri. Actually, Missouri, if I remember correctly, like because this also maps out geographically.
yep.
Like Northern Alabama has a very strong Church of Christ presence, and a lot of them wear head coverings
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because they interpret First Corinthians and what Paul is saying because of the angels, etc. Right? But it's only and you can map out then all the influence of these things.
Yep,
So I grew up in this culture that was Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. We'd have gospel meetings. You know,
yep.
um, my dad had done a law degree. My parents met at Indiana University, and I was born outside of Indianapolis in Bloomington. Sorry, not Bloomington. My parents met in Bloomington. I was born in Noblesville. When I was like toddling around barely, we moved to Hollywood, Florida. So then, right up until kindergarten, we were in Hollywood, Florida. I have two younger brothers. Uh, we all have, Daniel, Jacob, Nathaniel, James, Joshua, David, right?
Good Bible names.
Yeah. My mom had converted. She had grown up kind of Methodist light. That's the best way to describe it. And then, college romance, the intensity and sobriety of kind of Church of Christ, like we speak what the Bible speaks, we're silent when the Bible is silent. You know, it's very captivating. And there's a bunch of history because once I got to college, I started reading about all this and trying to like place myself in like, where am I? What is all of this?
Yeah,
So when we moved to Arkansas and I grew up in Arkansas, this is my dad taking different churches
yep.
about every 5 years.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
and because it's congregational, it's more about, I think they're in a natural life cycle of a pastor in a parish. If you don't have outside forces, at least, unless it's Methodist where they're moving you around,
Right.
you know, sometimes it just comes to an end because there's usually the dynamics of those small churches is there's one or two families who are actually in charge of everything.
Yes, yes.
Even if you have the polity of, we have elders and he's the preacher, but then he's not the it just these
Oh,
all
yeah,
create
yeah, yeah.
sets of
CRCs
questions
would
that
have similar dynamics sometimes. Yep.
right. Well, because the background of Church of Christ is Scotch Irish Presbyterians in the frontier.
Oh, yeah.
That's who Alexander Campbell is. Right. So, and his trajectory, because he was sitting in on, I can't remember exactly if it was Thomas Reed or one of the Scottish
Yeah, yeah.
Enlightenment
Enlightenment
folks. He was sitting
philosophers,
in on
common sense
those.
philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the core of the background is so much philosophically, even though they don't realize it, what's going on.
But their
So,
polity was strictly congregational. They
yeah,
didn't
but
have any presbyteries or anything over them.
no, what they had instead is I would call brotherhood magazines. So
What's
instead of
that?
an actual polity where there's kind of like checks and balances or
Yeah,
some kind of body to do referee,
yeah,
it really became groups of preachers creating their networks together. I don't think they really realized, but they were basically creating denominational polities because you need it. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
need outside support. You need somebody to come in and mediate when there's a
yeah,
conflict in the church. So you don't
yeah.
just so, but they were very strictly congregational on paper. But then the reality is, because later my dad was involved with debates. Like I almost grew up like frontier. In some ways, I talk about like I grew up almost like in the 19th century frontier life because I grew up and my dad would like engage with oneness Pentecostals, Roman Catholics, and like public debates, like advertised. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, and that's a historic thing in the Stone Campbell movement. If you look back, because nobody had TV.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you didn't have the internet. You didn't have YouTube to do these,
Yeah. This corner of the internet meant you went to the local Methodist church and there was a big old debate for 4 nights in a row about why infant baptism or why not infant baptism or, those kind of things. So
Yeah.
that was just part and parcel of the culture because it's very that also I think that Scotch Irish kind of common sense Scottish philosophy
Yep.
is interwoven. So it's very rationalistic
Yep. Yep. Yep.
and very debate
Yep.
very also in some senses ahistorical because they also don't really realize what they're doing. The first of the movement, they realize they're throwing off the shackles of like all of these inner Presbyterian debates in Scotland. I can't remember the exact title, but I'll make one up. That's basically like New Light, Anti-Seceder, Burger, Presbyterian, blah, blah, blah. And you had to
Right.
have your coin to prove that you could be admitted to communion, right? And then the frontier, like America does for everybody.
Yep.
Presbyterians have to go to Princeton, but these guys, they can just read their Bible and then they can argue with each other and then you can just have a church. And why do we need creeds? Why do we need all of this stuff? So, in some sense, it's really super American,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's
Mm-hmm.
really super Enlightenment. It's really super frontier. We can all just
Yep.
get together, read the Bible. We should be able to just figure it out together, and then
Yep.
we can just be Christians. We don't need any of this other stuff.
Yep. 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 Have you read Mark Knowles, any Mark Knoll on
Yeah, but not
basically?
like, yeah, not like I read Stone Campbell movement. So when I went to college, we'll just jump to that. Like I was already starting to have questions in high school because, well, I was reading. I had my own kind of, I'll say conversion experience at a summer camp where like one of my best friends at the time told me I was the worst influence on his life because I was doing the teenage rebellion thing, you know.
Those PKs can be that way sometimes.
Yeah, let's just say I had made choice decisions that could have got me in big trouble. That I was in like late middle school, high school, doing stuff that I should not have been doing.
Yeah.
And with that, it was a summer camp. There's all the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it just is
Very
what it is.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd already been baptized when I was like 12 or 13 because they do believers baptism, and I was scared to death of hell. So had gotten baptized. And then this kind of reinvigorated faith in general. And so I started preaching and I started
Oh
like
yeah.
my
Yeah.
own email thing that I'd send it to young adults
Uh,
because we're all from like a certain region of Arkansas.
yeah.
So I
Yeah.
got really in like at homeroom in high school. I would sit and read a commentary on the book of Isaiah. I was a weirdo, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
wanted to learn. And so I started reading philosophy. I was dating a girl. That's a whole other subsection, right? But she wasn't in the right form of Churches of Christ because of a debate around what we call it, had an acronym for it, MDR, marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Where exactly do you fall on the spectrum of who can actually be divorced?
Oh
Can you remarry
yeah.
after a divorce? What if
Yeah.
somebody has divorced not because of adultery, but then has been remarried? Then they come to the church. What is that? Is that a marriage?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 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 All
All of
those
those
issues.
questions.
Yeah.
And they're having, my dad is involved in all these debates with the Brotherhood magazines against other Brotherhood magazines and all this. It's almost like I grew up in some ways the frontier, but also like the third and fourth century because all of these debates end up with what is your Christ? What who do you believe Jesus is? What is salvation? What is the efficacy of the church? Like all of these questions are
Yeah.
just raging all the time. So
Yeah.
that's what I grew up in.
Yeah.
And so I have all these questions because I'm preaching and trying to read Romans. I remember trying to read Romans and understanding Paul because I had been drilled into my head little. I had Tulip memorized from my
Yeah.
dad because we were anti-Calvinist too. Even though we had the background of Presbyterian, anti-Calvinist.
Okay.
So I had
Interesting.
Tulip
Yeah.
drilled into my head, but why it was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like the particular verses as to why it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because theology is like a roadmap or like not a roadmap. It's not even a roadmap. It's more of like a scientific book or math book. You get off the shelf, right? And you just kind of read it and you find your verses and you attack your opponents.
Yeah.
I say all of this with all love. I've been through, like, I'm very appreciative of the way I grew up. I see the faults, I see the strengths, I get it, but there's a reason why I'm not there anymore.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are good people. They have
Yeah.
the same foibles and troubles that everybody else does,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that trajectory sent me once I went to college. That as soon as I went to a Bible college called Florida College. There's at least one other person in this corner that who has spoken on some live streams recently and who is at Estuary who has the same background. There's a few people actually at Estuary that I didn't even know that were going to be there that we knew who each other were from 20 years ago.
Wow. Really?
Oh yeah,
That's wild.
yeah. So and this is also like I don't want to get too far out of the timeline and start
Yeah.
breaking it up
Yeah.
and making
Yeah.
it complicated. But so when I got to college at Florida College, this is in Tampa. I start reading voraciously, like Harvard Theological Journal, whatever's there present, because it had a Bible faculty, some of who were all like trained at like Westminster Theological Seminary and stuff, which is fascinating in a whole other vein. But
Yeah.
now I know that now, right? At the
Yeah.
time, it's just like, oh,
Yeah.
PhD, you know.
But you've got a library, and it's a well-stocked theological library, so you can start to roam around and read where you will.
Right. So little flashes of, because obviously you call me Father Daniel, I'm an Orthodox priest now, right? So flashes of even that. In high school, I had a teacher who said, because I was arguing, we're the original church. He and I, because he was Roman Catholic, I think he was like Portuguese Catholic, like centuries into the tradition, his family. And I'm this upstart 17-year-old who's reading his Bible, like
Yeah.
on the side while he's trying to teach medieval history.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, if you really want to join the original church, you should just become Orthodox. And I'm like, that doesn't mean anything to me. I have no
Right.
idea what that is because
Right.
I'm in Northwest Arkansas all the time, like Bentonville, Arkansas. Like, what? So then when I get to Florida College and I'm reading through stuff, this is when Brian McLaren,
Yeah.
Emergent Church,
Yeah.
postmodernism as like the buzz of everything Christianity today. That's what they're talking about. So
Yep.
I'm reading that stuff.
Yep.
And then there's this one book that I pulled off, and I forget who it was, but they are talking about, because I grew up non-instrumental Churches of Christ too, which meant is all a cappella singing.
Oh, that kind of
Yeah.
instrumental.
Yeah. No instruments, four-part harmony. It's beautiful. You can go on YouTube and find beautiful singing. Like I
Yeah.
still look back and but it was unscriptural to have instruments,
Right. Yep.
right?
Yep.
So there's a book written about this where somebody had gone off, because some of these guys, because I'm not the first person to go through this path per se, in the sense
No.
of like grow up in a very particular tradition, go off and get a little bit more education, and go off to Yale, Harvard, et cetera. I know CRC, you guys have these guys
Yep.
in spades, right?
Yep.
So then you get exposed to the wider Christian world, and you're like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
Somebody wrote a book that I didn't realize who it was, but they had been talking with I think Father George Florovsky or Father John Meindorf, who are famous Orthodox theologians. And this book is like, we were talking to these people. Their church also doesn't use instruments, and they've existed for a millennia, and they don't use instruments. See, we're not weird. So these little things are already in my head, but I'm reading and trying to wrestle with, why don't we all just pick up the scriptures and read it and understand it?
Yeah.
Why, like this common sense, like this obviously doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's not because people, because I would make friendships and relationships with people and be like, these people aren't bad people that just don't want to believe the text. They just
Right.
fundamentally don't agree
Yeah.
because they have different first principles of how to read the text.
Yeah.
So I'm reading, trying to wrap my head around post-modernity, the emergent church, all the blogs are coming
Yep.
online. So I'm reading like N.T. Wright, uh, Philip Yancey,
Yeah.
and I'm just chasing footnotes everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but I'm also reading like it's Restoration Quarterly, which is a specific kind of academic journal about the Stone Campbell movement. And it's
Oh.
tracing the history, because I'm like, I am so enlightenment because my entire tradition, and so I'm going through this like, how is this possible? How does this all work?
Yeah.
And I just kept reading and reading and reading and getting myself in more and more trouble because I asked too many questions. Nobody has good answers for me. Um,
So you're a student at this point still.
yeah, I'm in college. I still, like, I've been preaching off and on for 2 3 years before I even went to college.
Yeah.
I do a summer internships like in Columbia, Tennessee, and then in Port Arthur, Texas. And in Port Arthur, Texas, um, that's where it's just like, I can't do this anymore.
Oh,
I just do
wow.
not, I don't believe, I cannot
Yeah.
in good conscience do this anymore because I theologically am not here.
Yeah.
And I had too many questions and not enough answers.
So when you would preach in Church of Christ churches, and so you would stay
Yeah, no,
sort of
nowhere
within
else.
that
Oh.
network. What's that?
No, nowhere else. You know
Okay.
that classic joke that I think gets attributed to different denominations. I actually read this. a Romanian Orthodox saying that this is a joke among Romanian Orthodox clergy back in Romania. Like you get to heaven and you
Right,
have to be quiet around the corner because they think they're the only ones here in heaven.
right,
That
right.
was a very classic Church of Christ joke, you
Okay.
know, with for Baptists and Pentecostals and evangelicals around us
Yeah,
growing up.
yeah. So you were so th was this Bible college associated then with Church of Christ too?
Yeah, but you're hitting on the non-institutional thing, right? They only accepted donations from individuals, not from churches. Exactly.
Well, it's
Harding University or Freed Hardman, they're the bad ones. I'm being facetious.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
at least they have principles. They stick by this is what they believe and they stick
yeah.
to it. Although I don't know where Churches of Christ are right now in general. What I'm hearing and understanding is like there's no way they can't handle what is happening with the internet
Yeah,
and
well,
having to change because
yeah,
there's no way that you can keep some of these positions historically, theologically, pastorally. I don't know how you would do it.
yeah.
Um, because a lot of the people I knew that went to college with me were spread to the four winds.
That is so interesting. Because I mean, all these particularities, they do have ramifications on down the line in different ways. Like in the Christian Reformed Church, we had this very covenantal understanding.
Mhm.
And so uh, Calvin College received ministry share quotas from churches, and eventually it sort of came to go towards like student aid because then as again as these processes of assimilation impact, then you have to make all these accommodations because in the CRC when my parents and to a degree when I went to Calvin in the 80s it was still vast majority CRC, but the
Yeah.
evangelical clients were starting to grow. And I think now a majority of Calvin students are not from the CRC. And this has taken place in Christian schools because it's so funny because the college was a training ground for clergy originally. The college is owned by the denomination, and the seminary is owned by the denomination because they split off at some point. But the local Christian day schools, because of Abram Kuyper, were
Yep. Yep.
not owned by the church. And so that differentiation has gone in different places. Must everyone on the board be going to a Christian Reform? I mean, and so part of what's happening right now in the Christian Reform networks is they're dealing with all of these questions that are all sort of second, third generation immigrant questions, assimilation questions, and then you're going to have, um, theological questions down the line. I mean, I haven't, I mean, it's obvious. Yesterday I was obviously busy, so I didn't watch any of the Charlie Kirk memorial service.
Right. Yeah.
So I started eating that bit by bit this morning. But there's a whole world of culture and to think about with something like that, it's like, oh my goodness, how does this whole thing work? So you're going to this Bible college connected to your denomination, still very much
Not a
not
denomination.
formally connected. Gosh, you're going to
Confederacy of similarly minded people.
similarly, even though you've got grads from Westminster, Philadelphia in your place,
But they're
and
Church of Christ. They went there.
oh.
They're Church of Christ. It's not that they were Reformed. They were Church of Christ. I mean, where are you going to go if you're going to do PhD work? Do you go to godless Harvard? Right? Like, even though back
Weren't there
then,
any church? I mean, Church of Christ was a significant denomination. They didn't build institutions up.
nope.
Interesting. Was it the anti-intellectualism?
That's what
Okay.
I would say. Well, and there are monographs about this, and I'm forgetting their names because I read these, but this has been over 20 years ago now for me, right? Like I can't remember exactly, but if I went back, I could start telling you,
Yeah.
The Mark Knowles of
Yeah.
Churches of Christ or the Stone
Yeah.
Campbell movement. And a lot one of those books that I remember the basic thesis is this is all they would say it's a little bit more than this, but basically it's socioeconomic. It is disciples of Christ. If you look, they have their houses at University of Chicago Divinity School, Vanderbilt Divinity. You know, they're in the educated. So an early debate that occurs that creates this rift is historical critical method coming from Germany. And a
Yep.
huge
Yeah.
debate about Jonah. Is Jonah real?
Right. Right.
Right?
Right.
Is that
Yep.
what behemoth, what animal? That's not a whale.
Right.
So they have all these debates. And so the disciples of Christ, but even the disciples of Christ, if you go to like Eastern Kentucky disciples of Christ, you might as well be in the Church of Christ, like more like what I grew up in. But if you go to Louisville, you can find basically ones who want to be Episcopalians, right?
Interesting.
They won't have the theological points about the Eucharist or those things because they have such a lower view of it. Christian Theological Seminary is in Indianapolis. I think its roots are disciples of Christ more. If there's like there used to be Lexington Theological Seminary because the Stone Campbell movement kind of comes from Eastern Kentucky. The Cane Ridge Revival is where
Yeah.
they kind of
Right.
locate the
Right.
beginning, which is weird because there's like barking and like those kind of signs of the spirit. At the same time, there's like comes the Churches of Christ, which is like secessionist, rationalistic, just
Well, maybe if you get a little too much barking, they'll go the other way. They'll be like, the barking. I'm just not down with the barking.
and so even weirder. So one of some of the early people in the Stone Campbell movement, also one of them is a signature in the front of the Book of Mormon because this is all the same time period.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just this really fascinating that desire to go back to the early church.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's hang that there, like that, come
Yeah.
back to that in a
Yeah.
minute, right? Like let's
Yeah.
go back to the early church.
All right. So you're preaching, you get to a point, it's like, I can't do this anymore. How are you, where are you through? Are you like a junior, senior at Bible school or
I
Bible
just finished
college?
my sophomore year,
Oh,
and
early.
so I'm going to transfer to another school because Florida College also really at the time didn't have a whole lot of degrees. It was mostly associate's degree and then maybe like a
Oh,
Bible degree and I think
okay.
maybe like a business degree.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about maybe 300 students. We're not talking about, you know, like with Calvin
Yeah.
or Hope or some of these other like
Yeah.
this is a small affair. Like probably the first generation of Calvin, small,
Wow.
right?
But it's so interesting because I mean, that's a much larger movement in terms of the Stone Campbell. I think that impacts, it's far larger than the Christian Reformed Church in terms of the the body weight of that group. You'd think
Yeah,
if they
right.
had a different ecclesiology where they could cohere, they could have done much more substantial institutional development.
But I mean, the substantial institutional development they have, it's just not the groups that I grew up in, would be like Harding
Oh,
University in Arkansas, David Lipscomb in Nashville, Tennessee,
okay, okay.
Creed Hardeman in Jackson,
So you're
Tennessee,
basically
Abilene
on a
Christian.
fringe.
Yeah. And most of and the reality is, because I've met some of the folks who are in like either professors in these places or were students of these places, they're all having theological schizophrenia because they don't know who they are because their tradition is so actually thin. And so there's like remove or renewal movements. I forget what the Lipscomb professor is, what his John Mark Hicks, I think it's one of the names. They want to kind of be a little C, a little R, a little Catholic, little Reformed group. But to make that
Uh,
argument, nobody who grew up in the Church of Christ will resonate unless you've gone through the process of encountering everybody else and like
yeah,
trying to, because you just say, well, we just do what the Bible says.
yeah, yeah,
But when
yeah,
you have to go through that kind of like philosophical and cultural and just realizing it's not that simple. It's
yeah,
way more complicated than you think it is.
yeah.
Um,
So when you hit this point, are you talking to your father? I mean, how does that go with your family?
Not well.
Oh gosh.
Uh,
Because your
things
father's
are much
debating,
better.
he's going, it's pre-YouTube out there. So,
Right. I'm just reading a whole bunch of books and blogs, and
yeah,
podcasts were beginning,
yeah,
right? I think I had to like sync my iPod and download stuff ahead and put it on my iPod.
okay.
So the stuff that I'm listening to, this is like, I don't know if it's early. emergent church, but like Tony Jones had just begun. I think you know some of these names because you've talked about some of these
Yeah.
things, right? Brian McLaren,
Yeah.
but I also had a kind of some of this is also that I grew up with Rush Limbaugh on the radio all the time, and so
Oh,
I'm getting a little bit more educated. So I start
okay.
moving to the left too politically,
Okay.
not giving up on like major Christian moral
Right.
ideals because there's no way I can read scripture and come away and just say like I can get rid of all this stuff.
Right.
Because if I was going to get rid of all that stuff, then I'm just going to get rid of all of it because it
Yeah.
all to me hangs together.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how to not do that.
Yeah.
I don't put Paul as a lesser person that I should can just say like, oh, that's just his opinion. No, apostolic authority. I can't
Yeah.
imagine Christianity without
Yeah.
that. And so, but this is like me kind of going to like a Dorothy Day Catholic worker, like
Right.
the new
Yeah.
urban monasticism stuff that was happening at the same time. So like
Yeah.
I met Shane Claiborne, who's outside of Philly. I was going to American Academy of Religion things. I was just trying to understand what the heck is going on.
Yep.
I even
Yep.
met like James K. A. Smith back,
Oh,
I think before he was at Calvin.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, one of my professors in undergrad who was very important to me actually came to my wedding was Dutch Reformed from Iowa,
Uh,
CRC, Calvin grad. I think
yeah.
he was there before um, the later lights were like, I think he was there like right when they started, and then he went off to do PhD work.
Oh, okay.
His name is Arvin Voss. I think he's back in Grand Rapids, and I think he's actually at there's the Church of the Servant.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think he's actually there now because we've talked a little bit,
Okay.
emailed a little bit in the past few years.
Well, some people watching this will make connections. They'll play Dutch bingo. If you drop a Dutch name in the CRC, they
Well, and
will,
Voss too, right? Like
yeah. There's plenty of
I
people
also
don't
grew up.
understand when someone came to this church, there was a pastor De Vries before me, and then an elder was named De Vries, and one of my friends who came to this church is like, De Vries, De Vries, well, you guys are like cousins or something? He's like, lots of De Vrieses. So plenty of Vosses out there.
Yes,
Although
exactly.
the Dutch bingo is like, this we're gonna find all of our common ancestors who got off the boat, and yeah.
Church of Christ is the same way.
Hmm.
Maybe not with last names, but like, oh, you went to that church. You know
Uh,
my cousin or my aunt, right? Like,
yeah.
and of course, Orthodox is the exact same way too. Like, if
Yep.
you said like almost everybody that you've had on here, I'm at least one person away, or I know one person away who has Orthodox, or I know them and have talked to them before, right?
Yep.
Like, it's just a small world.
Yep.
These little small platoons of, to use
Yep.
that language. So I read too much and I was afloat. I left. You asked about my dad. Yeah, that didn't go well. I tried. The long and the short of it is I basically got cut off. Uh,
Oh.
well, because we Church of Christ is fellowship, almost like Amish style, the way that I grew up.
Oh,
So if
wow.
you're leaving, what is it, the language of scripture of like you hand them over to Satan,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Uh, it didn't really work. It just caused other problems. Uh, because I was in good faith. Honestly, I wasn't
Yeah.
trying to
Which is
leave.
why a lot of those practices, I mean, people look at church discipline. Oh, we should practice church discipline again. There's reasons why a lot of those practices have receded. It's not like they weren't tried. It was like, all right, so you're really not going to talk to him, and he's not living out there in the world. He's really studying the Bible, and he's clearly acting in good faith. I mean, that's part of what has led to, a lot of what people, yeah, anyway, it's led to a
No,
lot.
no.
So, yeah.
Well, it's why I appreciate in Orthodoxy that they moved it to Eucharistic discipline and not you can't enter into the building.
Oh, oh, couldn't enter into, oh, yeah. See,
Well, it's,
the CRC, you'd have to sit there and watch them have communion without you. But,
see, I mean I mean. You moved it to the Eucharistic disciplines
right.
because it gives space for people to be working through stuff
Yeah.
versus the kind of like. I mean, I wouldn't have been escorted out of the building. That it wasn't like that.
Right.
And they don't have closed communion either. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
meant like there, I don't, it's too many details and it's not the main
All right.
thrust of the story. Everything is better now.
Good.
That took marriage, kids,
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Grandkids will soften people.
And I think my brothers having their own journeys and
Sure.
things,
Yep.
etc.
Yep.
And my mom involved, it's just always different.
Yep.
So things are much better than they used to be. Thank God. So, but I'm just kind of adrift and trying to like, what am I going to do? Because there's like the emergent church thing that I'm kind of, and I'm like with a small group of people that are interested in, and like we're at a little Bible church for a little bit, but I knew that this isn't where I was going to stay forever. I'm reading a lot of, I would say like the Yale Duke stuff. So like Hauerwas,
Oh,
George Lindbeck,
yeah.
like I know this is all very intellectual biography, but this is the reality of how I was working out all the stuff that I had
Absolutely.
growing up, right?
And
So,
some of the audience will be right there with you because I
well,
mean,
the thing, the final hook, because I'd listened in this corner, and it wasn't actually Pajot, because people I think assume, oh, Orthodox priest Pajot. Like,
right.
no, it took me a long time to actually appreciate Pajot.
Yeah.
Lovely man. Sometimes because I had so much of a philosophical framework, because I'm trying to think things, I'm working through hermeneutics.
Yep.
My professor, I was reading a whole bunch of Augustine Aquinas, Bernard Lonergan, who's a Jesuit, Canadian philosopher. That's the stuff that I was trying to work out. How do I understand things and read things?
Yep.
Uh, and so when your interview with Will Call Distance, that's the name that he
Yeah,
has.
local distance. Yeah. Yeah.
That was the one that finally I was like, and then hearing some of your CRC conversations, I'm like, this tracks in so many ways, just in a different, like, it rhymes with so many things. And I think that's also a lot of people at Midwest area. You've talked about this, right? Like
Yeah.
this, they're coming out of the emergent, they're kind of deconstructing, but they don't
Yep.
like, I deconstructed, but I was trying to reconstruct. I wasn't trying to
Yep.
just go off into whatever. I
Right.
was trying to make it make sense and be coherent
Right.
in some way that I could actually live out what I thought the gospel meant.
Yeah. Some of the deconstruction, when people just sort of deconstruct to get free and just live out there, those are some of the saddest cases because at least they had a community, they had some semblance of a worldview, and then they're just out there, and different people are going to take, different people deconstruct for different reasons. Like your journey sounds very intellectual, very philosophical. For some people, it's, much more, well, how can we say it, familial,
Yeah.
pastoral,
Yep.
some awful traumatic, some trauma happened and they just can't, this doesn't cohere anymore. So they go out there, but if they don't actually find any help or manage to put something back together, then it's real domicide and they're just living out in the Serengeti. And it's like that gets awful.
I know some of those people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then you see them years later and it's like you deconstructed for this. This is an upgrade to that must have been awful because there's nothing attractive about what you're doing now.
What's interesting about that is I saw that pattern, and in the past 5 years, a lot of those people start going back
Yeah, yeah,
because they're like, oh, this hedonistic, nihilistic, just be in the world, in the Johannine sense, like the world,
yeah,
like this is great. And at some point, you're in your like mid-30s, like, I'm gonna die. I'm
yeah.
alone. I
This is no
have
place to live.
can't afford this lifestyle.
No, no.
I gotta calm down.
Yeah,
And then they turn back in various ways to belief of whatever
yeah,
they can piece together
yeah,
after, because I think once you've alienated yourself so far, it can be really hard to get back because I encountered this at Midwest area, folks talking to all sorts of different people, they had some intense experiences with Christianity of whatever stripe, and that has set them on decades long trajectories that they're starting to come back or like
yeah,
actually take Christianity seriously again. And
yeah,
it's just really sad of how much brokenness and people who I think are honestly trying to do the best they can,
yeah,
but they don't, for lack of intellectual or pastoral, whatever, they can't give people the space to process that stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because it's
It's so
complicated, because I
true.
get it, because it can destroy a community
Yeah,
very
yeah,
easily.
yeah. And the Book of Pi begins with this interesting story making an observation. They're talking to a zookeeper, and the zookeeper makes the observation that, these lions live longer in zoos than they do out on the Serengeti. You know that, don't you? And people are like, no, I like the idea of a lion out there. And but he's like, here they're they don't get broken bones, they don't get preyed upon, they don't have conflicts with elephants, you know, and the truth, and he makes the observation. I mean, if you were to take a normal human being and grab them and involuntary cast them and naked and alone out someplace, they wouldn't last long. And because we do need a home, we do need, and that home has to involve all sorts of things. And no, it is tremendously tragic watching people, and I think for me that's part of why I've done what I've done with this channel and with Estuary, is because for many people the the matrix is too complex. I can't say, here's your reconstruction package. Bang, I'm going to make you Christian reformed. It's just not going to work. Um, and so my idea is basically, well, how about if we have a network of at least a lot of good faith people who are a little bit flexible and they care about one another, and here you can start to follow some footnotes here. And this, maybe you can build some relationships and start putting something together, and you can find your way back out of domicile into a home once more. Because it isn't necessary, and it varies, in terms of temperament. And I'm sure you see this pastorally. Some people, they're just like, bang, I'm in. Here's a church. I live right over here. Everybody seems to be of good faith. These are healthy people. It's wholesome. I'm in. Other people, they're gonna stand in the doorway a long time, and they're gonna, you know, and they might join this for a few years, and then they're kind of over here, and then they find this person. I mean, it's just people are just super complex, and their journeys are gonna be super complex. So you're better off giving sort of a something that's resource rich, that they can you know, begin to, and but that's again, some people criticize me because you need a track for people, and it's like, yeah, but a lot of these people, they don't do tracks, they were
I,
all on tracks, and what they're allergic to are tracks.
Well, and it's like trying to find the metaphors that work that help describe, because we also can't be boundaryless. I
Right.
I, I find it fascinating post Midwestuary listening to the conversations, and sometimes I'm just like, it's just like, guys, just be a loose ragtag group of people. Like, I appreciate that you're like, I can't commandeer this. This doesn't run like I'm the captain on the ship. There's no way that you can do that with
No,
this
you cannot.
unless you are trying to get everyone to buy into like very particular ideological things, and it
Yeah.
just doesn't work like
No.
that.
No.
You wouldn't be do I would not be a part of it. I know most of the people that are the most active would not be a part of it.
No. No. No.
So it just doesn't, people are so fractured trying to find meaning and connection and to be loved and to be seen.
Yeah.
And this it's what I've appreciated about the corner is that there's a pastor who's pastoring with I'll say a light touch, right? Because obviously you can't actually really pastor people, because like you can't pastor me through the screen. Like I
No.
can't do that with people.
No.
I've had all sorts of people who try over the time, like what I mean, I'm like, I don't know you. I have to know you. We have to have coffee multiple times. And I wouldn't even presume that I know you for a year or two. And even then, I'm going to be careful to not destroy you by giving you things that you can't even comprehend and or do.
That's right. You have to watch them do things for a while, and then you have to see. you have to wait for eruptions in their life that happen because maybe their mother visited them and
Yep.
bang. And then you learn every time their mother visits them, they're gonna go off drinking or something for a while. I mean, you just
Yeah.
don't know with people. I mean,
Right.
people are like that. So you just kind of have to wait and watch and you learn and then you say, I think I can trust them with this. And then they do well with it. Say, hey, I can trust them with that. And now maybe I'll try and trust them with this over here and see how they do with it and see the way it goes and how and of course, in a church, how other people respond to them doing that too, because it's one organism
Oh yeah.
and there's no other, you just need time with a lot of this stuff and you need contact. And it doesn't have to be like, I mean, part of what people want in terms of having a program or a set of tracks or something like this is they just, and again, this is a conditioning from this mechanistic mentality that we have in the
Yep.
Enlightenment age,
Yep.
that people are fundamentally widgets that you can somehow process in your ideological machine, and that's going to send them down this certain track. And so much church programming is that way. And again, it's not that tracks are bad. You just have to understand how and when they're useful, for whom and how and for what. But it's just when you get a mass of people who are self-selecting from watching certain videos, they're going to be all over the freaking world.
Oh,
They just are.
you are talking about my pastoral life 24/7
Yeah.
because this all maps on, like, I think it was the other day or recently, you'll say, what is orthodoxy? Like, what orthodoxies? I'm like, yeah, because of exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
There are people, the ortho bro movement in general is an attempt to try to create a tract because it's young, typically young males who want, this is why I was really fascinated, and I'm not saying all these males are this, but like your autism, the podcast you had, the whole time I'm just like sitting there going, Amen.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
sent it to multiple friends. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is what we like, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah.
Because they so much want certainty. And I grew up with that kind of
Yeah.
certainty
Yeah.
and that, so this like anti-Cartesian, like you get all philosophical, but like, it doesn't matter, right? Like, and it's not that I have trust and faith in Jesus Christ, the tradition, Christianity, the tradition, and it made the most sense at the time that I was, and still why I'm Orthodox.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't mean like that I can just extrapolate in some really abstract sense and throw things on people and be like, you should be able to do this now. Like, no, 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 no. Most people, even some people are like, we're going to wait another year. Like, you're not ready for this, and it's okay, you know? And
Yeah.
the ortho bro movement generally, it's not even a movement. You know what I mean? The
No, I
moment
know
it's
what you mean.
happening,
That
it
spirit, that impulse, that
it
yeah,
wants everything to be locked down
right.
with such certainty. I'm like, you haven't actually been around orthodoxy long enough. Like, I I it just doesn't work like that because
Yeah.
humans don't work like that. And if
Yeah.
you think, and then they'll go, oh, the Pope will give this to me. I'm like, no, it won't. You'll just enter into the hermeneutical spiral over there where everyone's arguing about all that stuff. Like, and you just have another component to have to process.
Yeah.
You can choose that path, okay, but you just have to be aware this is what you're going to have to wrestle with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that pastoral reality of like there's different orthodoxies, well, yeah, because like as you've been saying, and I think in your last interview that you published, the fellow who lives in Wichita who worked at
Yeah. Yeah. Nathan Filbert.
I'm glad I listened to that because I was like, I know like so many things that he's talking about. Like I know exactly who he's talking about, what.
Yep.
And I was in the Antiochian church, the Greek church, and I'm a priest in the OCA, which has a kind of, and people say Russian, but like, yeah, it's Russian, but a lot of the core of it is actually Carpatho-Russian,
Yeah.
which is another ethnic, like Ruthenians or Rusins, which is the Carpathian mountain range, and like Western Ukraine, southern Poland, former Austro-Hungarian Empire, basically.
Okay.
So a lot of the people, like in my parish here in Chicago, okay, the burbs, because everyone Chicago loves to like make like you don't actually live in Chicago. Okay. Like in the Southwest burbs, they were in a parish on the south side of Chicago. and almost all of them can trace back the core people to villages in now present-day Slovakia. Right? It's right on the
Yeah.
border,
Yeah.
and that's where they're from. So that's where a lot of the OCA comes from, actually.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
but when you're talking about ethnic things with the CRC, I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, we play out all of these things. You're having a conversation, I think, with a CRC minister about rectories and compensating clergy and these areas that used to be where the denomination was strong, and now it's like all demographically changing. You have all these young bucks coming in who want to be confessional and they want to like really get, and then the older guard is just like, what is going on? This isn't the church I grew up in. Welcome to Orthodoxy in 21st century
Yeah.
America.
I can believe
And
it.
the only difference is that I think, well, there's many differences, but some of the differences are like for the Antiochian church, for example, like where Father Andrew Stephen Damick is, they've had new waves of immigration.
Oh,
And then you get like the Ukrainians, they have their new waves of immigration. And there's kind of steady trickle of Russians. And
oh,
Greeks
that'll
are
get complicated.
it very much gets more complicated because it starts to settle and then whoo, a whole new community, and then you go backwards in
Yeah.
your pastoral approach because now the cathedral in LA is not half and half. It's like 80% basically refugees, immigrants, and like
Oh.
third generation people. So it creates a whole new dynamic, and you're still getting bishops from across the seas.
Well, it's interesting to me because if, let's say, there was some, heaven forbid, some catastrophe in the Netherlands, and we started getting this
The
wave of
dikes
Dutch
go.
refugees coming to the United States, I think most of them would not look for a Christian Reformed church. I mean, and
Because you guys are kind of a pause of a certain era and time of Dutch life that then moved over here, right?
actually two pauses.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I remember you talking about
Because
that.
there's the wave that sort of ends before the First World War, and then the post Second World War wave, but they go to different places geographically. So the post World War II wave goes to Canada and California, whereas the first waves went Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, and then spread to some other places. So, but I can't imagine trying to manage a whole new wave of, because I would imagine, again, because of, so the church in the Netherlands had a different valence, obviously, in the late 19th century and even in the middle 20th century than the church in the Netherlands has now. I mean,
Yeah.
the Netherlands is so thoroughly secular, but oh gosh, I can't even imagine trying to. Yeah, I pray for you guys because man, I see your ortho bros and I see all this stuff going, and it's just like, and I didn't even think about new immigrants. That
Oh,
just,
yeah. It's a whole other thing.
oh
And so
gosh.
it creates, and every jurisdiction had, I say jurisdiction, right? Like Antiochian Greek, Ukrainian, OCA, ROCOR. There's even Moscow Patriarchate churches here. There's like three or four very like Russian
Yeah,
or originated
yeah.
jurisdictions here. And like here in Chicago, there's a big ROCOR parish cathedral close to where we were in Elmhurst. And that is various waves of Russians. And so they do Slavonic. They're almost like a little oasis of Russianness. And I attract mostly converts here at my parish because on the southwest side, we're the most English speaking parish in the southwest
Yeah,
side of
yeah.
Chicago
And
because
I would
and this is one
imagine,
of the most
yeah.
Orthodox places actually in North America
Wow.
because the Slavic element here is so high. So it's just a fascinating, complicated, because people when they come in, it seems very simple. Like I hear you when you're trying to like wrap your mind around because you're getting bits here and there, and I get
Yes.
it. I live inside of it, and
Oh,
so when I hear, I'm just like, eh, I get that take. But even people who are like been Orthodox for 20 years,
yeah,
it's different when you're clergy and you actually know the bishop involved or something, right? Like
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just a very different thing. Like, oh, it's not actually that. It's actually this other thing that's not being talked about because you don't air everything,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then
All
it's
right.
usually
Anyway, we got to
not.
get back to your story, and then we
Yeah,
can
yeah, 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 yeah.
and then we can compare notes. So you're oh gosh, you're young. You're and
Yeah.
so
I
what
was
do you
like
do then? So you switch
22.
schools, and boy, and then you're
I
kind
went to
of
Western Kentucky University, is where I
okay.
went.
Okay.
That's
And
in
what is
Bowling Green,
that?
Kentucky.
I have no idea what that is.
That's a state school that
Okay.
had a weird conglomeration of religious studies faculty that had been there because there had been like a reformed presence on campus. So I had a bunch of, again, Westminster Theological Seminary trained people or like in that general little R reformed orbit that had been there. They're all gone now. Either, have reposed or are retired and moved back to Grand Rapids, Michigan or something, right? Like, um, but this was like a New Testament professor, a Greek professor, and religious studies in general. And then Arvin Voss was like one of my philosophy professors.
Okay.
I read Augustine with him, Aquinas, metaphysic, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this was the height of emergent church, radical orthodoxy. Have you ever heard of that movement, like John Milbank and
Yep.
co?
Yep.
Um, so there's a lot of heady stuff, and I was trying to process and read it all. So I said one because I did. Do you remember the blog by he's an Australian, Ben Myers, called Faith and Theology? It was really, he did a lot early theology blogging. This
Hmm.
would have been like 2004 to 6.
I could have run across it because back then, you're just I mean, these blogs are new and they're all over the map, and this is a whole new thing now
Yeah.
where instead of just sort of being, I mean, even as a pastor, and so I'm pastoring this small church and I've got time to read, and reading's part of my job.
Yep.
And so blogging is coming on, so I'm reading all these blogs. And of course, the emergent movement is sort of, really riding that wave. And I've got, all these books from those cats here. Um,
I've moved too much and I've gotten rid of them
yeah,
like
I've got to do
four
that.
purges ago.
I've got a real book problem here. But anyway, and there's a lot of them. It's so because there's a lot of them. It's like I'm never going to read this stuff. I'm not interested in this stuff. It had its day. It was what I was working on then. But who am I even going to give it to? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I
I
don't
can
know.
think of some names and titles that like totally you know, I'm surprised for like Stanley Grins is not talked about in these
Yeah,
circles. Like
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
few of these
yeah,
guys that I'm like, these guys would work. Like there's tools out there for if
yeah,
you're a kind of deconstructed evangelical to try
yeah,
to stay instead of just
yeah,
deconstructing yourself out of faith, that you could still stay in the orbit.
yeah.
Because even something like Mars Hill, and I don't mean Driscoll Mars Hill,
You
but the
mean
other what isn't that what the Seattle? It's now the
those?
Seattle School of like Theology and Psychology or something that started up in Seattle. I think it used to be called Mars Hill too, because there's like
There's a
Rob.
lot of Mars Hills around. I
Yeah, I
know.
thought that was the thing to name your thing, right?
Yeah,
I think they moved away from that, but they went and now it's all psychology for them. Like almost everything they do is psychology. And even one of their professors was somebody in the emergent church. I
yeah,
think it's Friesen or something like that. That's another Dutch name,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
Well, see the Dutch and the Germans
Friesens.
and I don't know because it all depends on the spelling.
Gotcha. Okay.
But
Okay.
then
Okay.
anyway,
Yeah.
um,
So I was reading all this stuff. I'm trying to figure it out. I was going to like a Bible church. I knew at some point reading that it's like I have to go to like a liturgical sacramental church because I
mm,
tried the Methodist church and that wasn't going anywhere. I mean, I talked to the elder
they have
who,
their own problems.
well, it's especially now. And, I'm like asking, like, do you believe in the Nicene Creed? Because they're just trying to, like, what do you believe?
Yeah, yeah,
What are you willing to die for? I didn't say it like
yeah,
that, but just kind of like,
yeah,
what do you actually believe?
yeah.
Like, do you like believe the virgin birth? It's like, well, we highly value personal interpretation of scripture. And I'm just like, am I talking to a Methodist or a Baptist? What,
Wow.
and the disciples of Christ was also just like, and the Episcopal Church, in my experience, it's just like they're one step off of exactly where they are now, kind of
Yeah,
basically oblivion,
yeah.
you know. they're bleeding people left and right, and I just like I can't sign on to
Not
this.
all Episcopalians. I mean, there's a few of them
I
out there in
know,
the corner too, but
I know, when I've met some recently, and I know that there's it's a broad.
yeah,
I'm painting with very broad
yeah,
brushstrokes because you could say this about Orthodoxy too, that we're having our own issues, and it's
yeah,
true.
yeah,
Um, but it's like Catholic, but my experience with Catholics is that the ones I was around with, like they're almost all fundamentalist. And I was like, I'm not, I was reading the authors of the Vatican II. I can't sign on to catechism only Catholicism. This just doesn't make sense to me. And that was what I was kind of surrounded by. The Episcopalian Church, I could tell you stories about that, but it did not resonate with
yeah,
the way I grew up with at all.
yeah,
And so it was kind of like Orthodoxy was the thing. And I went to a liturgy, and that experience of the liturgical life, had already started reading a little bit about it.
yeah, yeah.
Father Alexander Schmemann and all these things. So then when I encountered it, and then I encountered people, uh, a priest and then subdeacon who's now a priest. I actually felt like I encountered some wisdom and some stability,
Yeah.
and had actually tools so that I didn't feel like I was just kind of religiously schizophrenic, just trying to like, because the emergent church kind of created also a fragmentation, like, oh, I like icons. Oh, I like, Taze music. Oh, I like,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
just like
yeah,
this smorgasbord of like, and it's not a tradition. And I am ultimately the consumer who gets that's, I think this is well called distance too, right? Like I will become the product, and I want to be shaped by something else outside of myself.
yeah, yeah,
I want a tradition because I realize I can only because I'd read, I could get philosophical here, but like I need to be within some framework where most of us basically agree with the first principles, so that when I say, Paul says this, or John Chrysostom, or whoever says this, people go, "Oh, okay," instead
There
of, "No,
is
no,
there
no, no,"
is some authority in this container that helps it cohere and helps the community actually function.
because if you don't have that, then it's just a bunch of automaton,
Yeah,
atoms bouncing back and forth, and it's not a church.
yeah,
It's something else, and that's fine. It has its place, but I wanted a church. I
yeah,
wanted something to live by and
yeah,
die for because that's what I believed in.
yeah.
So with that, then I became Orthodox. I'm obviously simplifying some of these things. Um, I was baptized in the Little Harpeth River in Nashville, Tennessee, because I was going to a church in Nashville. There wasn't a church in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
So
This
how
is
did you think
well,
about the rebaptism?
so this is an int well, I at the time didn't really care
Hmm.
for
Well,
multiple
how
reasons.
young, how
I
old were
care
you
more
by
about it
that
now.
point? How old were you by that point?
I think I was, I think I was 24.
Okay, so it took a few years to
It was
work through your stuff.
I was 23,
Okay.
22 or 23.
Single,
I'm
married?
doing the time that I have to single.
Okay.
Although my wife at the time, I knew her and we had dated for a month while I was a catechumen, and then later we got married.
Okay.
So she was actually at my baptism.
Oh,
Uh, I don't know if the bishop approved the priest baptizing me or not. I don't know. Part of the challenge with Churches of Christ and congregational from an Orthodox perspective is like there's no website, there's no confession of faith, there's no
that's right. Of
creed.
course there isn't.
So what do you have to reference besides unless I had I've had somebody who came from that background that I received into the Orthodox Church. They had a video of the baptism, so you can hear what is being said. So that meant I didn't have to baptize them because for my bishop in the OCA, generally speaking, I'm not going to like we recognize water and Trinitarian invocation as what constitutes baptism.
Right.
Now I know this is a hot topic debate, and we don't need to go into all that because
No,
I
we
could
don't.
definitely get into it. But I don't. This neo-Cyprianite kind of sectarian view of the church is not. I'm not a fan.
Interesting.
Neither is my bishop, nor most of the synod of the OCA. But
But your comment, this is why having these conversations is so interesting to me
yeah,
because I never would have, I mean, that's the reality about combinatory explosiveness in the world. In because when you're actually a pastor or a priest and you're working in a church, things come up, and it's like, oh, okay, do we wait a minute? They, by virtue of their tradition, they don't have a creed or a something, and and so then you just have to begin to make decisions, because every person that comes to you in this astoundingly diverse place that we live in has all these different aspects to their life. And so when it comes time to, okay, how do they join this church now according to our tradition? And then sometimes you just gotta make the best decision you can based on the information you have. And it might be that 10, 15 years later, it's like, oh, well, if I had known that, I
Well,
probably would. But
well, I mean, that's that this is also the it's not my decision ultimately.
yeah.
I punt to the bishop. The bishop is the one who makes those
Oh,
decisions. That's the way it should happen. Not saying that's what how it always goes,
yeah.
but clear-cut cases, I know what to do.
Yeah.
More complicated ones or situations where people are conflicted about it, I will
Yeah.
at least let's say, okay, let's write the bishop, let's draw up why and what happened, and then he can make the decision, right?
Yeah. See,
So
that dealing with bishops is a whole thing that I don't have because of our,
yeah, you
our
have a
particular
presbyterial model. Yeah,
ecclesiology. Yeah.
yeah,
So you punt it to the classis, and then you're actually dealing with sort of five bishops and 30 pastors. It's because they're not actually bishops, but they sort of are too, because if
yeah.
they
No,
stand up and they say something, everybody hears what they say. And uh,
yep, yep, yep. Which and there's pluses and minuses to either
yep,
policy.
yep.
So it's like, yes, I have my answer, but inside I'm like, I don't like that answer, but I have to do what the answer says.
So what was the path to so you when you joined, did you knew you would aspire to the priesthood?
I mean, in some sense, but I was also okay with not because I also did not want to just rush in because even before becoming Orthodox, I still all of my formation in theological reading was very broad. It's not like now where I encounter folks, they become Orthodox, they've read like a single book by a Catholic author and watched YouTube videos. I mean, I was reading a lot, you know? So my formation and theological education is I'm not trying to I'm just it's just the reality of like I'm not sectarian. I grew up, I would call it kind of sectarian, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
have a sectarian idea. Am I Orthodox? Do I confess to Orthodox Church as the church? Yes, because I'm an Orthodox presbyter. If I didn't, then I wouldn't be here doing this.
Yeah.
Do I believe that God is merciful and gracious and has to deal with all the complexity that I encounter on just a tiny, yeah. So thank God I don't have to make all these decisions, right? Like I
Amen.
tried to do the best pastoral wisdom that I know from my tradition, and people are going to have to like that I can't I say this a lot. I can't faith for you. You have
Yeah,
to trust God and do the things and make decisions and take the risk and I
yeah,
can't do that for you.
yeah.
So um I had wanted to go to like a Duke or something like that because I wanted to do PhD work in theology.
Oh, okay.
Or like I was looking at different, Notre Dame or different
Yeah,
programs
yeah,
because I read broadly in theology.
yeah,
We don't have to
yeah.
go into the weeds about all of that, um, but I actually went after I was baptized, graduated college, philosophy and religious studies double major.
Okay.
You know, and I didn't really know exactly what I was going to do next. I moved to
God
Indiana,
bless the philosophy and religion majors.
who
You and
all
the
of this,
engineers on the gravy train.
but this is all like because I'm working out deeply like who I am and what I'm doing with my life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And whatever, I didn't care.
yeah.
Of course, my dad was like, "Why couldn't you just gotten, a practical degree and got a job, right?" Uh,
Do you know how much ministers don't make?
I do now, and I am well compensated for an OCA priest. I'm not saying that
I
about any
understand.
reflection of
I
now,
I
but in
completely.
comparison to what I probably could do if I put my intellect and my abilities into other realms. My father is also a lawyer and my brother's a lawyer. If I'd gone down, I,
Oh,
yeah,
ah.
I could have been fine, right? So, um, I go off and do move to Bloomington, Indiana, and I actually eventually get into a library science program
Oh,
because of manuscripts and rare books.
oh.
And I almost did an art history degree. I studied like Serbo-Croatian. I was just doing kind of a lot of broad things because I like really like poetry.
Let me ask you this. What was the other job you were working to finance your educational habit?
I worked at a publishing like a vanity press in
Oh,
Bloomington.
okay.
I got married like right at the beginning of the library science degree
Okay.
to my wife, Chelsea. And she was working at the university while I did the library science degree. And after that, then this would I would have graduated in what like 2010 because I graduated college in like 2008. So like jobs are
Oh,
not plentiful in
no.
general anyways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I'm what you call it a geriatric millennial. I forget which it was a Newsweek article or something that was trying to like define that generation at that time. And what it meant in that article was like, I understand boomer speak and I can also translate it to, younger folks.
Okay.
So I feel like I'm in this way. I do this right now as a priest. Like I totally get and can hang out with my older parishioners
Yeah,
who exist from a different world and era, right?
yeah, yeah,
And then I've
yeah,
got these 20 somethings and I know their lingo and stuff,
yeah,
so I can still
yeah,
talk to them.
yeah.
This is receding. I can see the
Yeah, yeah,
horizon.
yeah. The Zoomers they're still running out. It's like, whoa, how far are you guys gonna go?
Yeah. But so I did the library science degree mostly because I also wanted to still do PhD work in theology, but I knew how bad the reality of doing that was. So I was trying to
Yeah,
get myself a way to have some time to just kind of soak and compress and decompress, but also if I did a PhD in theology, then I could still at least work as a theological librarian or something.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So I was trying to be smart. Well, we leave there and move back to Bowling Green, Kentucky because of friends and there at a church, Orthodox church had started. And we lived there for about a year and I could get no traction for jobs. And I was like, even starting to apply. I mean, I think I even applied for like a library job in like northern Wisconsin, which would have been almost like me trying to move to like Saskatchewan or something, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, just trying to get some traction.
yep.
We had some difficulties in Bowling Green. Uh, we find out we're pregnant. I'm also applying to master's degrees, and I applied to Vanderbilt Divinity kind of on a whim because it was close because my wife is from Nashville, right? Uh, we're making decisions. We're pregnant. I get a good scholarship to go to Vanderbilt Divinity. And so we move to Nashville and I go to Vanderbilt Divinity and I do an MTS, a master's degree at
Yeah,
Vanderbilt Divinity
yeah.
in systematic theology and I'd say like political theology, etc. I had a good experience. I was tried to get recruited to become Methodist while I was there, and I already knew the writing on the wall. My professor was very nice man, but like, was already like he retired like 2 or 3 years later. The writing was on the wall,
Yeah, you knew
right?
where that was
I mean,
going.
he even talked to Jürgen Moltmann about me like going over to Tübingen to like study in
Well,
Germany or something,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
but at the time, this all sounds good on a certain level, but I'm like, this is all gonna burn.
yeah, yeah,
All gonna
yeah.
die. When I was at Vanderbilt, this had been like 2012. 13. My entering class was almost 100 students, I think. And with some attrition later, I think like some of the required classes is like 70 something students. Now, I think it's like 30,
Wow.
20 or 30.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
The
believe it.
writing is on the wall.
Yeah, yeah,
Theological education, or at least some of these institutions,
yeah,
I I don't know how they're going to exist
yeah.
anymore.
A lot of them
I don't
aren't.
know who they serve. I mean,
Well, that's yeah.
you are graduating. I had, people in those classes that I was with who they point blank did not believe in God, and they thought religion was just a practical tool for liberation.
Yep.
And I'm
Yep.
just sitting across the table and going, "You're on a fool's errand, man. That this is not going to work. I know you want to help the oppressed, but it's better if you went over to the black church and became a Pentecostal than trying to do what you're doing." Because the natural allies, I hate using some of this language, but the natural allies I actually had were like black Pentecostals,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like because they believe in spiritual warfare. They
Yep.
believe like, and
Yep.
like maybe I don't agree about every single political move, but like at the time I was generally like, yes. So but when 2020 comes and like all of the rush and explosion of stuff that happens because of the pressure cooker of COVID and the lockdowns, I'm like, I knew all this stuff a decade ago. Like this has
Yeah.
all been there. You
Yeah.
just didn't realize it.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter, that was already a decade, 20 years into the makings.
Yeah.
And just because you didn't hear about it doesn't mean it wasn't there,
Yeah.
you know? So that experience was formative in many ways for me. Um, I saw just how Theological Academy was a dead end, even
Yeah.
though I might have been able to eke it out if I had made compromises with myself.
Yep.
Um, but I was Orthodox, and I struggled with Orthodoxy mostly because I always felt like, and still it can be a struggle. At the time, I was going to a Greek church, and it was too much in Greek for me. Even the priest, who at the time, and he could speak Greek, but he is a convert, American convert. It still just kind of always felt like Holy Week, and we're doing all this Greek, and most of the chanters, almost all the chanters at the stand, because I would help with some of the chanting, being none of them were Greek,
Hmm.
and they learned ecclesiastical like Greek chanting and stuff, but
Yeah.
they're not Greek, and they don't speak Greek like at home. But like you try to bring somebody to church, but it's like three-fourths of it's in Greek. And I know what's going on because I can at least make out sometimes because I'm at the chanter stand and I know enough theological vocabulary, etc. And I'm just saying, like, why are we doing this?
Well, then there's the Latin Mass.
That's a whole, and
Well,
my,
but you're exactly right. I mean, this is the strange place that we're in right now. And I would imagine that there's some who I want to go to a Greek church where they're actually, do you understand any of it? No, but I really like it. It's like, all right.
I've never seen that work in the long run.
Yeah.
I've been around, I became Orthodox, baptized in 2007. I was around at least most of 2006. I've never seen that go well unless somebody almost goes full native.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the Greek church. I love Greek people. I like the hospitality, that like the warmth. It is all there. Like
Yeah.
that is, but it's just the practicality of like
Yeah.
my friends who might be interested, but I can't even bring them to a liturgy without them just being like, how do I connect to this? I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
connect to this.
There's a naive I have some friends who go to traditional Latin Mass, but I think that's a little different because, of course, it's segmented in the Mass, and the rest of their church experience, their priests, they're all dealing in English. But there's sort of this naive, I don't know what it is that it's like. What's so interesting to me about all of this is that let's say this originalist impulse
Yep.
that Christianity continues to foster, whether it's sort of the Stone Campbell movement
Yep.
or Orthodoxy or traditional Latin Mass. There is a sense in Christianity of a an alienation that comes through history, comes through successive generations, and an attempt to overcome that alienation, whether it's going back to say trying an originalism that focuses on the Bible or one that, let's say, focuses on apostolic succession. But there is this need to address that alienation and the change over time. But every church is going to be, it's Stott's uh, preaching book. It's going to be a meeting between two worlds in a sense. You're going to have to somehow deal with those two worlds, and whether you're going to have to deal with your tradition is going to have to deal with this present world and everything that this present world is throwing at the people that are in your church. You're just going to have to deal with it.
Yep.
So And there's
And
no,
and this is the reality of Orthodoxy in this country. Like, I'm a priest at a parish where I'm probably straddling eight worlds
yeah, I believe it.
at least, because converts from 10 years ago are different from converts now, are different from people who grew up in the Serbian church, on the near north side of Chicago
Yeah,
to, or when I was in Tennessee before, the flavor of Orthodoxy there was very deeply inflected by Anglican and Baptist,
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it has its own cultural valences and
yep,
challenges. And a big challenge that I found at that time was I needed the people who'd been there who were, I'll say normal for lack of a better word, rooted, no, rooted, right? Not
yep,
normal, rooted.
yep,
Even if they were abnormal, they were rooted.
yep, yep,
Right?
yep, yep,
Whatever even is normal. But like
yeah,
they this is what they knew,
yeah,
this is what they grew up,
yeah,
and when they tradition people into it and be like, bless your heart, you want to like, you know, do these things at this intensity, but you probably need to slow down a little bit because you're going to burn out your wife, and that's not a good idea,
right,
right?
yep, yep,
That stuff that like generally would fall to the priest as opposed to like the general wisdom of the community. And that can
yeah,
be challenging,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Especially because you have to vie. And I wonder how this vies for you. I have to vie all the time with the internet. Because now, if I was a priest 15 years ago, I'd have to vie with maybe one person reading a random book or pamphlet or something, right? Or going to a monastery and having an awkward conversation or weird conversation that I can like level out or figure out with the bishop, and we can just say, like, ignore that crazy monk, right?
Yeah.
That is not the case anymore. I
No.
mean, you're even listening. I mean, if you had up and commenting on peers and like marital relations and all this stuff that like when I became Orthodox first 10, 15 years, I didn't hear about any of that stuff. That wasn't a normal discourse in any of the churches or situations that I was in.
Yeah.
And so it
And
makes you think that Orthodoxy is a bunch of like very interesting people.
well, and I look at your challenges and I think, yeah, you've got it in spades because the Christian Reformed Church is a fairly narrow, youngish tradition. And when people, and so I, it's, you've got people from all different places of the world. It's 2,000-year-old tradition. And I just think, oh gosh,
I mean, I could
because
start listing that, a Ukrainian woman who doesn't really identify as Ukrainian per se, because basically her family speaks Russian from the Crimean region, who's married to somebody who's not Slavic, who, and then their hang-ups about baptizing their baby because a lot of Slavic women think that they're not worthy to be present at their kid's baptism because there's all
oh
sorts of like even when I have folks who like want to be a priest, I'm like, you should just actually go around and visit other churches and learn kitchen Greek, learn kitchen Russian. Like you need to
yeah,
know the cultures and the like where
yeah,
because you're not going to understand. And you think, oh, we're all Christian. Like, yes, you're all Orthodox Christian, but like there's so many different flavors out there because that village or that pope, priest for a Romanian, like priest, from 200 years ago told somebody's grandmother X, and then that's what they grew up thinking. But
yeah,
like that's like a superstition, or
yep,
that's like
yep.
not
And all the
actually.
individual particularities. I had a guy who he was a founding member of the church. Last few years of his life wouldn't take communion. So I so what's with the not, what's with not coming to the table? You know, if I knew I wouldn't be asking you. I eventually found out through someone else that he thought he was under discipline. So I went to him. I said, I'm your pastor. We have a council. If you were under discipline, I'd know it. That's what you say. So I found out from his son that his grandfather had been put under discipline in Iowa years ago. And however they practiced discipline in the end of the 19th century in Iowa, that was somehow roaming around in his head. And but that's just one person in one tiny little immigrant denomination. When I think about all of the, you have my, boy, I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. But this though gets into, again, part of why I really wanted to have something like Estuary for a long time was exactly this internet thing. Now, I've had it better than a lot of people because, well, I can't really say that. Well, the people, the group of people in my church that grew up CRC, well, that was a fairly homogeneous thing. They knew the Heidelberg Catechism. I could get them. They were fairly easy. Then I had a fair number of people who grew up in various black churches. But that too, sort of American evangelicalism, you could sort of figure out how that went once you sort of learned how most black churches go. But you're right, when it comes to the internet, now you just really don't have any idea what's going to go through that door and come through that door and how it's in any way attached to. It used to be by virtue of, let's say, their ethnicity, um, part of the country, family of origin. You could sort of begin to cut the combinatorial explosiveness down, ask a few questions, and begin doing the analysis and start working the problem. But people are people are getting catechized into all kinds of strange things on the internet. And which is why, again, I wanted a pastoral tool that was really open, because when they come into a room, you're just going to have to listen to them talk for a little while to get a sense of where on earth are you coming from? What are the assumptions that you yourself are carrying that you don't even know you have?
Yep. Yep.
And suddenly when you say them out loud in a room, it's like, oh, okay. Well, if in fact you do continue to move towards becoming a member of this, and you've got the church community, then you have the estuary community, if you do start migrating more towards the church, but even if you're in the estuary, I am kind of the only pastor you have.
Yep.
And because you're not a Christian, there's some tools get taken off the table, but I'm still going to care for you in some ways. And then if you want things like funerals or weddings or things like that, I mean, so I am in that sense sort of a community chaplain. But again,
Yes.
as a minister, as a
You're describing
pastor, as a priest,
chaplaincy.
you still do that anyway.
Yeah. It just has some boundaries or
Right,
a major tributary that you're kind of
right,
fishing in, for lack of a better,
right.
phrase.
And you can
Uh,
actually get then people, then, part of the reason I liked it too was then the people in the church that participate in it, then they're beginning to be like, oh, they find commonalities out there because they're formed by the internet and the media too, but then particularities. And then there's the age differences, like you say, between, I got a lot of boomers, I got some builders yet, and then we got a few millennials, and now we got, some older, you got some millennials, and then some Zoomers coming in, and then for these successive generations, some of whom are struggling to understand their children and grandchildren. Now, talking to some other people, they're getting some, oh, it's not just my kids.
yeah.
These people are being formed, and these people, and I mean, doing pastoral ministry is a very challenging thing just because of the massive diversity. And
Yes.
so, one of the things that I can really recognize and appreciate about a liturgical tradition is that this is one of my reformed colleagues here who's always, he's a church planter, but he's always trying to say, the denomination really has to tighten up in terms of liturgy, because then at least a liturgical tradition, as long as you don't have to deal with too many particularities that are out there too, which I'm sure you do. But a liturgical tradition at least then says, well, it's going to be a little crazy in terms of what everybody believes and what everybody thinks over whole ranges of things, but at least we can experience some unity and some body life with this liturgy. And this will help us, care for each other as we go through time. I can really appreciate that.
Yep, that's why I became Orthodox,
Yeah,
ultimately.
yeah,
Liturgical, ascetical,
yeah,
mystagogical, all of those things are kind of wrapped up into each other. And it has its pluses and strengths, and it can have its weaknesses
yeah.
because that can also, as I think that you are discovering, um, it can sometimes be a facade for not actually having unity. That there is a lot more. And I would say basically, like those who think the Orthodox Church is parallel or can have the supposed unity of the Roman Catholic Church, that's going to be really, they don't even have the unity. That
They
it's a
really
quixotic
don't.
quest for everyone to share all of the same opinions, and I don't think it actually bears out historically. I'm not saying that to be relativistic. I think you understand
Right.
what I mean. Like
I know
talking
exactly what you
about
mean.
a field of like we can all ascribe to the creed. We all basically agree with the tradition, but I can find in quote fathers who disagree with each other. And if you think it's all just like everything is this super clear thing, I'm like, no, it's not. So if you get online people saying, well, the Orthodox Church believes like everyone should be rebaptized because of blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, yeah, but what about Basil when he accepts Arians not by baptism? Or like there's all sorts of like
Yeah.
the church has made all sorts of exceptions. Father Seraphim Rose, who's like a favorite in that circle, was chrismated. He was not rebaptized.
Um,
It's just it's always more complicated.
yeah. Yeah.
And when you try to like have 30-minute like this is what it is, this is the ultimate teaching. Some things, yeah, you can do that. Other things like this is more complicated. It requires wisdom. And I think that's like it requires wisdom, it requires pastoral acumen and that flexibility not I mean this is very clear in Paul and Chrysostom also picks this up very strongly. Like not flexibility as in you're just all over the place, but like certain people you need to work with them in certain ways. They can take a soft word and they're ready to like repent, right? Other people you got to come in ready to like wage
Yeah.
war in order to get them to wake up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're destroying your family if you continue this adulterous affair.
Yeah.
Stop making excuses, like figure
Yep.
it out,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And that a great book on Christendom is actually written by a Calvin University professor. Oh, that's on this point. That is just one of the best books on Chrysostom. Oh, what's his name? Rylersdom or
Oh, yeah.
Rylersdom?
He's at Calvin Seminary. Yeah,
Yes.
Rylersdam. Dave Rylersdam. Well, he formed my colleague who is, so well, that's part of what, is these these trends are going on. There's a reason why we're having a moment where churches and people are hungering for more liturgical discipline and unity. Because so there was actually oh gosh, I got to be careful with it, but there's very interesting minister in another denomination who I remember talking to. He and his church have been on their own particular trajectory, but he said to me, he said years ago, he said, you CRC people, you're always trying to do confessional unity. He said, but a lot of the main line have been practicing liturgical unity and attempting that. Now, things haven't gone well with the main line, and one might argue that, you know, part exactly some of the problem that they've had is because they've broken from their liturgical traditions.
Right.
In, liturgy also has its own combinatorial explosiveness, which is why traditions are living things, and it requires wisdom to continue to maintain a tradition, to know what is sort of leading the tradition into violation and what sort of continues to hold it together despite all of these other changes that come through time.
Yep. This is why I
So,
think it's going to be it's going to get more and more problematic because of the mechanistic mind that is being shaped
yeah,
by the technology that we have.
yeah,
Why something like Ortho Bro, to just use that as like the
yeah,
moniker for that general thing that's happening all over the place,
yeah,
this resurgence of conservatism per se, but really and it yearns and it has nostalgia for a kind of unity and a kind of thing, but like it's almost always overly simplistic.
Yeah.
And it's almost always, and I am conservative in a little c right? Like
Yeah.
but sometimes I see this stuff and I'm like, I am very afraid for what you not knowing what you are doing exactly. And you're going to create we're going to pendulum swing. And I'm really afraid, like, we're pendulum swinging in a certain direction. We're going to go back. I remember when Obama was going to save everybody
Yeah.
because that was my age. That was like when,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was, he
Yeah.
was the Messiah. He was going to bring about the usher in the eschaton of like, and now we have another eschaton that's being offered. And
Yeah, that's right. A new golden age. I said that. I'm like, oh, dude.
I haven't I haven't watched that the Kirk memorial thing that
No, I
you're.
haven't. I haven't watched it, but that was at his inauguration. Then he announced
Oh,
the
right.
beginning of it. It's the thing is, you don't. Golden ages are always in retrospect. I mean, dude, don't. Anyway, we won't go there. We won't go there. Um, but no, and I deeply appreciate that. But it's always the work of the church and leadership in the church to deal with these issues are perennial.
Yes.
Um, and there's no any reading of church history sees that everyone is struggling with something, and you're going to have to make your way through it. And I think it's testimony to the spirits present in the church that the church is still here, and you know, and I'm again I think I praise God for the enlargement and the growth of Orthodoxy in America. I think it's going to be healthy and good for the whole North American church. And yeah, obviously all the different Orthodox churches are going to have plenty to work out. And God bless you. Go have at it. I'm glad it's
And
not
it's
my
always been
problem.
this way.
But
It's always been this way.
but the Reformed, we have all our own problems. Somebody on Twitter's made a comment about the Reformed Church, and I said, which one? I mean, you because I can point to RCAs in Manhattan with lesbians and rainbow stoles, and I can point to Doug Wilson and say they're both Reformed. So
Yep. There's Manhattan, Kansas, and then there's Manhattan, New York. There's
that's
Moscow,
right. That,
Idaho, and then Moscow, Russia.
that's
It's
right.
there's some rhymes and then there's some vast differences.
Yep.
Maybe one way that I've grown to talk about Orthodoxy that would be helpful because I think as I hear you struggle and other people in the corner struggle with it, and some people in the corner are Orthodox, but their experience is limited,
Sure.
right?
Oh, of course. They're a
Right?
member of one church and that's been their experience.
Right. Orthodoxy, I think one way to think about it is if there's all these kind of in Protestantism, there's kind of like all these different flavors, and it's almost like each one has its own kind of way of working out basic problematics and a mentality and a spirituality, and even then mental health issues that can be attached to that, right? Like Reformed are kind of shaped in this way, and then you have like the Pietist in a certain, and then you have like the Pentecostal, and then you have and they're like rationalistic, emotive, right? Orthodoxy has all of that
Yeah.
in it
Yeah. I believe it.
because it basically is a broad umbrella where you can have a fundamentalist, charismatic priest and then you can have almost rainbow stole, you know, that Manhattan thing going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And they're all in this and they have all of these challenges and problematics because we're all held together by our Eucharistic, creedal, liturgical realities. But the manifestations, kind of like how the Roman Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church is similar to this, right? You have all these flavors, and people want to make Orthodoxy that's like it doesn't have all these flavors. It's just empirically true. You can't get away from the fact that this is what it is.
Yeah.
You may not like that. You may want it to change. Okay, join all the other people who want those things to change too. But you're not going to get that kind of uniformity that you desire, because unity is not uniformity, and that has boundaries to where that unity and that uniformity can work itself out, where we'll say like this is a boundary that you can't pass, or you're going to have to find another unity and boundary somewhere else.
Yeah.
So because I think a lot of people think Orthodoxy is, because it gets presented and they're like, oh, that's what it is. I'm like, no, it's not. That there's truth to that, but there's aspects that are just not true.
Yeah. And if you think you can do this in the Roman Catholic Church and you aspire to be Pope, just see if you can change it from that chair.
You, you've read too much of medieval history, and you are just like being a pastor, just in a
Exactly.
small church.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
think that you can actually do that much to change things? Because if you do, you're probably not going to have a job. Because you'll get run out and it will be over. Because and you might be able over decades of ministry to change little things. I mean, this is the basic literature and business literature too. You think you're going to change the culture of a business? Your percentage of possibility is very low, and it'll take at least 10 years, and you will only discover that after 10 years.
Yep, yep, yep.
There's just no other way,
It's true. It's true.
because we're all stubborn.
It's
We're all
it,
set in our ways,
it's it's
and
it's so funny. It's as if some people have never met people. It's like,
I have that experience all the time. They're like, why did they do that? I'm like, have you talked to people? Like people do these crazy things, as you know, as a pastor, like I have heard so many stories and so many things. I've only been a priest for 7 years, but because of COVID, I feel like I almost got double that like time spent doing that, right? Of all of these situations and how and it's just like,
yeah,
yeah, we're
yeah,
in 2025 and this is just the way it is.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, we followed your tracks for a while. I don't know if there's, we got about 15 minutes left. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to pursue.
What I guess Mid-Estuary was an interesting experience. I guess you could say I came out of the lurk, although I think this is probably more coming out of the lurk
Yeah,
than going to Mid-Estuary.
yeah,
And I really don't have the time and energy to like run a YouTube, um, because I have a lot of other hats I have to wear besides having 4 kids, etc.
yeah. And your kids are younger. My kids are all out of the
Yeah,
house.
exactly. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, but the dynamic is very interesting. And I wonder about the trajectory of like what the emergent church did. There's like the
yeah,
explosive, growth and all the chatter and da da da. And then it just kind of
yeah,
dies with a whimper,
yeah,
which is part also the life cycle of certain things.
yeah,
Um, and you can only do so much as a sergeant in the flotilla or whatever, however you want to. But it was very fascinating as an open space, still how theologically and Protestant coded everything is.
it's true.
I'm sitting there at the beginning of Mid-Estuary, and what was the first song that was sung? Was it like Just As I Am or something like that?
Yeah,
Was it
that's
Amazing Grace?
Amazing Grace. Yeah, it was Amazing Grace. Yeah, they picked
I'm
that for
just,
me.
and I just sat there and I was like, I know every word of the song, but this does not reverberate with me in the way that I know it does for all these other
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
know I'm probably not alone,
No,
that this doesn't reverberate with
yeah,
me.
yeah,
Uh, and not in a bad way. It just
no,
is that interesting where everyone, I think, is going to feel a little uncomfortable at different times in those settings.
yeah.
And if you feel really comfortable, then I maybe wonder, like, maybe you're just not aware yet that you should, at certain times, you're going to feel a little exposed or
Yeah.
vulnerable or on the spot. Um,
We've also done
yeah.
some Catholic. I mean, we've had two estuary events in Catholic churches where I got to feel uncomfortable
Oh,
because
oh,
then well, the one in Ireland, we
oh, right.
had
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Dominican friars and then Paul Kingsnorth and Martin Shaw and myself. And we actually had it in their worship. I don't know the proper terminology. They had to remove the host. So we had it right in the main area there.
Right.
Um, And then we had another one in DC, which was very Catholic. Um, and
What was the
so
DC one? Was that?
that was, well, Michael Martin,
Oh,
um,
Michael Martin showed
Spencer
up.
Clavin, and myself.
Okay.
And that was at there's this big Catholic, I didn't even know it was there. It's this big Catholic area in DC by the shrine to John Paul II.
The
Um,
JP2 Institute, the Immaculate Conception Basilica, all that stuff.
yep,
Yeah,
yep, yep, all that stuff. So we had one there that was a smaller one, about 40, 50 people.
yeah.
So it's been, and I didn't, I said, I'm not going to centrally plan any of these things. If you want to do one, gather a group of the willing and get it done. And so each one that sort of emerges has their own flavor, and they plan it. So the songs that they picked and what they did, that's sort of up to them. And usually it sort of reflects who's in that particular group that's pulling it together. And so that group in Chicago, you've got Sam, who's a Unitarian, you've got Mose, a CRC church planter. And so you've got a lot of Protestants, or at least people with Protestant background there. But you're exactly right. Then and then you hold it in a Protestant worship space. All
It
those
was a great space.
sensibilities. That's
It's a
right.
great space. I don't know
We've
if you could do better in the Chicagoland area. I mean, I'm not super familiar. I've only been here a
right.
year, but like centrally located, enough space, easy access to hotels. You can
Yep.
still get into the city relatively easily as much as you
Yep.
can with traffic around here. It's hard to beat that.
Yeah. But, it'll be interesting as like I have no idea where this goes in the future. I never have, and I haven't pretended to. I want to offer churches a tool that they can do with it as they will. I mean, and it's introduce, pitch, point, play. I mean, it's
It's
super
easy.
simple, but I do see the need for creating spaces that people can connect and network, and that is, I didn't know about the Eighth Day Bookstore at all. That was a new thing for me there.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah,
every
yeah.
time someone does something, if they've actually got enough, like the one that we're going to do South Estuary, Dave W, who's putting that one together, he's Orthodox.
Yep.
And so I really, every time someone decides they do a new thing, I walk into it about as wide-eyed as everyone else, because it's like, what are they going to do? We don't really give them the only template that I really try to give people is leave enough time for the estuary groups to continue to meet together so some of those relationships can begin to cohere. And if you're going to do an event that's all stage, okay, I'll show up and I'll give a talk, but for me, YouTube is pretty much displacing that kind of event. And that's, for Protestant churches that sort of lean heavily into, preaching, the preaching of the word, YouTube is in many ways sort of displacing Protestant churches in a way that it isn't displacing these more liturgical Eucharistic traditions.
Yep.
So that's another, I mean, and history is always throwing things at the church. And so churches are going to. So yeah, no, Midwest Jewry was very Protestant, but
It's
every,
fine.
yeah,
It doesn't bother me. I didn't expect to even think or process that, right?
yeah,
Because it's that weird space, as I know other people have commented, where are kind of consuming, you're interacting. I'm aware, like I know a lot about you and other people that is so weird and voyeuristic in a
yeah,
certain way. And then all of a sudden you're there and present, and there's that interesting, it's like an academic conference where there's like the celebrities,
yeah,
the authors
yeah,
who are giving their curated opinions, which is like,
yeah.
but I appreciate the estuary and having the estuary.
Did you participate in an estuary
Yeah,
group, and
yeah,
how
yeah.
did it go?
Fine, good. Luke was the head of, and I was wondering, I was like, did I get in here because he's Orthodox?
I
Uh,
think it was pretty random.
I think it was random. It was probably going to happen that somebody in my group was Orthodox because there was a
Yeah,
number of Orthodox present at Estuary.
yeah,
Um, but I think it went well. It's really interesting how small group dynamic it felt, like a Bible study, in a certain sense,
yeah,
and interesting how personalities play out and how very quickly, just like I'm sure as a pastor, like within about 3 minutes, I can almost kind of dial where somebody's at,
yeah,
you know, in
yeah,
their body language, the way they're
yeah,
talking to me. And so in Estuary, I'm just sitting there, I'm like, on fire with like all the things going on and also trying at the same time because I came in a cassock, right? I know that people made
yeah,
comments about there being Orthodox priests there in full
yeah.
regalia or whatever. Like,
That was me. That was
I
me. I'll
know
own it.
it's just our streetwear.
Yeah,
And when I'm like kind of on the job, because in a certain sense, like I had former parishioners at that like I'm Pajot, I know. So me being in my civvies, as I say, was just not really what I was going to do,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
I'm kind of on in a certain way. But then
yeah.
in estuary group, I'm kind of on and off.
Yes.
And so I can be vulnerable and I would try to be vulnerable and talk about things and be open, but there's always that still that part of you. I'm sure this is hard, but like I'm still a pastor and I'm still, if not a pastor, I'm still kind of like pointing in a certain direction and I'm not trying to, but like I believe the things that I believe and I want people to move from places of, say, scatteredness or what doesn't make coherent sense to me to try to get them to move in a more coherent
Yep.
direction,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So when they're equating Christianity with like pretty much everything else, I'm gonna be like, well, I think there's something a little like
Yeah.
I think there's a particularity about Jesus Christ that's beyond like he's not a yogi, he's not a Buddha, he is somebody else.
Yeah.
And I'm not like I'm saying that as a priest, obviously,
Yeah.
but I don't think he thought of himself that way.
Yeah. Well,
So it's just that, go ahead, go ahead.
no, I was going to say Protestants. So my father, wore a clerical collar into the 60s and early 70s. And then in the CRC, clerical collars pretty much went away. Now, some of my colleagues, like the colleagues I just mentioned, he'll wear a clerical collar.
Yep,
Now, others of my colleagues, and so this, but all those dynamics, part of the thing is because I'm known in that room because of my particular place in this. And
yep.
no, you're exactly right. And I think this is part of what the questions that America is wrestling with in terms of where does where does the church, whether you think of that as a body, institution, where does the church fit into this order, especially as will likely happen, secularity, a certain form of secularity that we have continues to diminish when people begin to realize that there's certain basic questions, certain assumptions have sort of held us, Protestant implicit assumptions have sort of held us as a culture. As those recede and decisions have to be made, how then does that work? Because of course, um, if you're identifying yourself as an Orthodox priest in the Ukraine, that has a certain valence in the community.
And depending on
And
which part of Ukraine you're in, even has different valences.
yes,
Western Ukraine,
and which part of
yep,
Orthodoxy you're
yep.
there then?
Or Greek Catholic, because they wear the same exact clothing.
Oh,
Yep,
wow.
yeah.
So no, it's yeah, and
It's
so I don't know where this whole thing is going, but
well, I
I
feel like we're going back. Was it Rusty Reno's book about the wild gods or like the resurgence
yeah,
of the old
the
gods or
strong
something?
gods.
Yeah, strong gods. That's it. Well, because what you just described, there's no such thing as secularity, right? I think you would basically agree with
Yeah,
this. It's
yeah,
just another form of religiosity that everyone agreed we're all going to agree with these transcendentals and we're going to form our lives around these things and we're going to worship these things and abide by these rules.
Right.
That's exactly what religion is. So, how do we, as this gets shook up and we, as globalization dies on some level, and but also is like roaring in other places with the internet, how are we going to figure out who we are? And it's just going to be this is not the future I thought it was going to be 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
places that we're at and the conversations and the realignment and the mixing of things is really fascinating to me. And
Yeah.
I honestly change my mind every once like
Sure.
about some major things that like a few
Yeah.
years ago I was way more Mennonite inflected generally speaking, even though I was Orthodox.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of almost back to that point now.
Yeah.
But I've kind of gone back and forth because I can see pluses and minuses of different arrangements because I don't buy secularity. I don't really buy the Enlightenment project as
Yeah.
being the end all be all of human civilization and where we
Yeah.
need to be.
Yeah.
But I don't really like the old forms either because I wouldn't be able to do anything that I've done in my life if I actually accepted the old forms. And
Yeah.
I realize that.
Yeah.
There's no way I could have grown up Church of Christ and then ended up as an Orthodox priest
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
100
Without
years ago.
right. And then if you look at, let's say, the old world, okay, so England is going to be Anglican again, and France and Spain and Italy, and then the Netherlands and Russia, and I mean, it's like you can't rewind this clock. And even though in some ways Islam is trying, I don't know that most of us look at that as being tremendously successful, even given the fact that, let's say, in Iran, they perhaps had the most cohesive attempt to say, well, let's have a pure theocracy. I'm not sure how long that's going to last. And then, of course, there's Israel, and what on earth that is, I don't know. Um, so, no, you're right. In some way, we are entering into a very live world with there's going to be a lot of live conversations, and I have deep concerns about how this gets sorted out because obviously in past histories there was a lot of bloodshed,
Yep.
and
These first principles, these commitments have ramifications,
they do.
and it's usually bloody.
Yeah, they do.
So as we're talking about this, here's maybe one last question because I think we're getting close to time. I don't have a clock in front of
Yeah,
me,
go
but
ahead.
a lot of this conversation, as I'm realizing, how much of Leslie Newbigin have you read? Because so much, I am surprised that maybe it's gotten mentioned once,
Yeah,
but because I still have of him, I've actually rebought some things
yeah,
because he seems to actually, in
yeah,
an accessible way, without having to do deep dives into like
yeah,
phenomenology and blah, 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 puts out, I think, almost everything that we're talking about theologically, philosophically, proper confidence that I forget some of the titles of the book, but I see you shaking your head. So, like,
oh yeah, I've
is
read.
Newbigin in the background for you in a big way?
I don't know, in a big way. I've read enough of him. Um, and oh, it's so interesting that you mentioned Newbigin because, okay, how many names do I mention? Um, so City Church San Francisco
Yeah. I know what you're
moved
talking about. Yeah.
PCA to RCA in San Francisco, and then they came into the RCA Central California West. RCA is kind of a partner classis of ours, some stuff I was working on, and they came in there and they swore they were going to hold the line on human sexuality, and then they didn't hold the line on human sexuality. They had a major effort, the Newbigin House of Studies, and they were really
Yep.
trying to use Leslie Newbigin as a way through that. I don't know what's happened to the Newbigin House of Studies since once they sort of changed their take on human sexuality, they lost a lot because obviously, if you're going to be, they were sort of downstream from Tim Keller. And so, if you kind of want to have, there's a,
You're out of the network.
well, yeah, and there's sort of if you're going to be a countercultural church on human sexuality in a very progressive city, that's going to create a container for you that's going to afford some things that when you decide you're going to change your stance, that container is going to break down. And now you're just sort of one among how many other mainline churches that don't
Are
really
living
get
off their
traction on
endowments.
anything.
Yeah.
So they were working Newbigin with the Newbigin House of Studies. To be honest, I probably have to go back even further because I really love Newbigin. But shoot, what was his name? Um, he was a missionary, a Protestant missionary at the beginning of the 20th century.
Hmm.
And when I was so of course, my formation was sort of a Christian Reformed racial reconciliation ministry
Yep.
during the Civil Rights Movement. And then I was just talking about this yesterday with the daughter of a Ukrainian missionary, actually. Um, and then I go overseas. And so I had to take what was a lot of implicit missiology from my father's context, and then I had to work it in terms of this Dominican context.
Yep.
And so I think probably I was really set up for a lot of what Newbigin would do then,
Right.
because I had to. So I go into the Dominican Republic, and all of these Haitians want me to be in a certain role in much more of, let's say, a 19th century missionary context, and we're just surrounded by a lot of independent missionaries that can be really good or really bad,
Yep.
and I saw both. Um, and so yeah, Newbigin really tracks. He's really helpful. Probably more people could stand to read him because, well, and of course, Newbigin, does his all of this missionary work in India and then returns to the UK, returns to he almost lives out the Chesterton idea that he leaves home and comes back to a foreign
Yep.
country.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And that is the experience of many of us now. And talks about liquid modernity. I mean, things are changing fast. The bet the benefit of being a really ancient tradition in liquid modernity is that I suspect the faster the velocity, the more certain structural archetypal things are going to manifest and be necessary for people, which I think has also to do with Rusty Reno's Return of the Strong Gods. Because if things are changing so fast, you're going to have to very quickly figure out what is really masculinity and femininity, and I think it's part of that reason why the this this flourishing right now of orthodoxy in the West makes sense, even while you in some ways you've got all kinds of you've got some challenges which are enormous. You don't have the challenge of being the Orthodox priest in Tbilisi, Georgia. He has different
Ve-
challenges.
Very different challenges. Very different.
So, in some ways, we're still dealing with a frontier context, but it's not the same frontier that the Stone Campbell, exactly, that to sort of bring it back full circle,
Yep.
that they were dealing with. But that also doesn't mean that if you study, you can look at Stone Campbell, you can look at Jonathan Edwards. I mean, in some ways, all of these frontier experiences mean that at least a certain element of the church is going to have to go under the cathedral with a flashlight and look around at the foundations, and you might discover, oh my goodness, there's some there's some tombs down here of saints, and we're going to have to discover these saints. And and that's one of the beautiful things about the church, and one of the beautiful things about orthodoxy. Again, I think about people talking like the church fathers, like, yeah, there's a lot of them, and they had to wrestle with an astoundingly, you know they had so much world they had to wrestle with, and what they have left us is for our benefit. But we also then have to figure out how to access this tradition and use it profitably and fruitfully. And it's not that the tradition answers all of our questions for us. It's, we afford, as again, as Chesterton said, we afford them seats at the table. And I think, to a degree, if we can imagine them sitting at the table with us, they would probably also say, this is what we dealt with, but boy, you've got this to deal with. And so you're going to have to take what I've learned and give you and figure out how to apply that. And that scales fractally. The bishop has to figure out what he needs to figure out. But because the local priest is working with each of these individual people, you have to do that. And sometimes you get things right and sometimes you get things wrong,
Yep.
which is how we make wisdom, hopefully.
Yeah. You got to own the mistakes and the problems, or otherwise you won't learn anything.
No,
You'll just
no.
keep running against that door,
Yeah,
standing up
yeah,
against it.
yeah. You can bloody your head. Well,
Yeah.
I am sure glad you came up to me at the conference, and I'm sure glad this was. And and again, I mean, I get a lot of crap sometimes because people think I'm letting down the Reformed side. Um, because you're so
That's,
nice
I
to the
mean,
Orthodox. Why aren't you battling them? Why should I? Um,
so I mean, that would be the same thing if I was doing what you were doing.
yeah, yeah.
I would
Well,
get that
I
same,
think you'd have it worse.
yes, I would just ignore most of it because most of my experience of those who have been around long enough would appreciate Estuary for what it is, Orthodox wise, right?
Yeah,
And obviously there'll be outliers to that, but I think generally converts go through at some point, they have to reconcile their past to where they're at, and it isn't as clear cut and perfect as they may want it to be. And you just have to learn to live with the gray and with the reality of what is, as opposed to what you think you can dream up.
yeah, yeah,
And I can't force people to come to their own realizations. Like all the time people who become Orthodox or becoming Orthodox are like, how do I like defend this to my mother? I'm like, you don't. Not that you don't that we don't believe what we believe, but like if your mother has no questions, that she is a devout Baptist, she's never thought of any of these questions, you can't create questions for her because they're not her questions.
no,
And so
no,
you'll be answering things that she doesn't care about, and all she actually cares about is that her son or daughter still believes in Jesus,
yeah,
right? And so just chill out.
yeah. And
Like,
be a good Christian because at
be a
first
human
she's going to
being.
be
Yep.
bothered and upset and she's going to, all this stuff's going to happen. But at some point, if she sees, my goodness, you're faithful to your spouse, you're good to your children, you're good to your church, you bless the community, she'll say, oh, well, that's what I wanted from him anyway.
Yeah. The proof's in the pudding.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and it's, as this sort of this stage cage, or cage stage moment with a lot of converts. It's sort of like falling in love. You see somebody who's fallen head over heels for the first time and they can't imagine how lucky they are to have found this treasure of a woman, and the rest of us are looking at her like,
That's exactly how I teach catechism class. I'm like,
that's right.
guys, this is that metaphor too. It's like you are flirting with a church, we're dating. I'll make you a catechumen, which is kind of putting the ring on it, right? And you are getting married to the church. And guess what? You know what Augustine says, right? Like the church is full of people, right? It's my mother, but she's a whore. Like it is. Yeah, like like I always say, like you're gonna have your honeymoon period, and at some point you're gonna get mad at somebody in the choir, or I'm gonna say something that you don't like, or I'm not gonna respond to your email as quickly as you think that I'm supposed to, or whatever. And then you're gonna have to realize that you are with a whole bunch of other sinners, and we're gonna have to work this out together. And you either stick with this and try to actually grow, or you're just gonna be out the door. And
Yeah,
I'm not gonna stop. I can't stop you,
yeah,
but if you're going to grow, you have to choose something and die there.
yeah, yeah,
Otherwise, have fun sailing
Yep.
because
Yep.
you'll be doing it alone.
Yep. 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 And yeah, yeah,
We're doing the
amen.
proverbial pastor, like the third, fourth, fifth sermon, right?
It's true. It's true. Well, Father Daniel, this has been great. If there's anything you want me to leave below, send me an email with any links to your
Okay,
church or to anything you want to include so that people can, maybe somebody's in Chicagoland and they want to find you or whatever. And
sure.
but I'm sure glad that we, again, I said I've enjoyed, I've so enjoyed getting to know. I don't know a lot of them personally, but other people like you have watched the channel, have come up and said, "Oh, I'd love to do a conversation with you sometime." And again, it's been really wonderful. So I sure appreciate
Thank,
it.
thank you.
All right. Well, I hope you have a blessed day. My phone has been ringing, and
I
as
haven't looked at mine, but I have
as
a
happens
feeling
on Monday morning, it's like I'm sure there's some leftovers that we have to deal with from
yep,
Sunday. So,
you got it.
all
All right,
right.
thank you, Paul.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.